Good day. Welcome once again to Spotlight on Seniors. Today I am happy to have on the show Peter Baker. He is a licensed medical social worker. He works with the Alzheimer's Association and he's in charge of their helpline services there. Today we are going to talk about dementia in general, the Alzheimer's Association particularly, and there's a lot to learn here. So Peter, welcome to the show.
Great.
Very happy to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So Peter, first tell us, well, let's start with a conversation that we were having
for sure.
a little bit prior to the camera starting. We were talking about the stigma that sometimes gets associated with Alzheimer's disease. And I know it's my big cause in life that we should be putting aside any sense of shame about what really is a medical diagnosis. I'm sure you encounter it all the time in your work. Do you care to talk about that?
Yeah, I think stigma is one of the biggest challenges many folks with the disease as well as their families face. Much like cancer, 30, 40 years ago, it was something that people didn't talk about. And Alzheimer's for many folks is still like that, although slowly people are starting to speak out and really giving a voice to the disease and showing that folks are at the disease in a wide spectrum. We're diagnosing it earlier, so we have many people that might still be working, still driving, still leading very active lives with the disease, but are noticing these changes, and these changes that are impacting some of their daily functions and causing challenges.
So you bring up an interesting point, though, that I know because at one time I facilitated early stage groups. The mere fact of a diagnosis doesn't mean that someone's life immediately comes to some kind of halt. People are being very active.
And there's a lot of benefits to that early diagnosis piece, too, because it allows people to be active, to have those conversations, to do things that they might have put off because, I was going to do that 20 years down the road, and now instead maybe I'll make that trip to Europe now that I was putting off. Maybe I'll have some of those conversations with my children. I think a diagnosis allows people to have a lot of conversations that they might not think of otherwise.
Well, that's true, and I think also helps people to stay socially engaged, which is obviously much better than withdrawal.
Exactly. One of the biggest challenges a lot of people face is depression. People isolate, people stop going around doing their normal routines. So things like an early stage support group, and we're offering 3 around the state. We're hoping to expand that. For people living with the disease, is a great avenue for them to go and find coping mechanisms and tools from peers that are also living with the disease. Or even some of the social programs, and I think certain communities, and we're facilitating some of these too in certain parts of the state, where people can go and do the normal things together. So maybe not talking about the disease, but going to a museum, going on a nature hike, doing some of that with other people who are experiencing some of the same challenges, so that they don't feel alone in this process. Right.
So you have an interesting role there. You manage the helpline, which operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Tell us about some of the kinds of people that you meet, stories that you hear. Give me an example of what it's like there.
I think it's the gamut. Thankfully, it's 24/7, but I get to home and sleep.
Yes, right.
So I'm not on call 24/7, but we 24/7. But we do have clinicians like myself, up at 3 a.m. in the morning. They're on Christmas Day, providing support because we know things can come up at any time. Sometimes people are calling because they're starting to experience some memory challenges and are wondering, is this Alzheimer's? And kind of wondering, what do I do next? Where do I go? And we help people find local resources. Sometimes it's a family member who's saying, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for 2 years. I'm exhausted. I've been doing this all on my own. Where do I go for help and support? And we can help people find, whether it's home care agencies or companion services that'll come in and help provide some respite, adult day services, long-term care centers. Help people locate things directly in their community and start that search and know some of the questions to ask.
Yes, because now, first of all, your office serves the entire state of Maine.
We do.
And you are connected with all the resources in Maine.
Yeah. We've got county resource directories for all 16 counties in Maine.
Right.
And they're pretty comprehensive, including things like elder law attorneys, neurologists, home care services, adult day services. Give us a call. We'll see if we can help find local resources to support people. And we definitely have one for Lincoln County as well.
Yes, right. So you mentioned a point that sometimes people may be having some changes themselves and they're just kind of wondering. I have to admit, I'm in my 60s. There's this phrase, expected cognitive changes that people can go through. I definitely notice a few changes for myself that are different than when I was, say, 35 or 40. And so people are always curious, how do we know what's a normal change of aging versus something that might be more pathological, that might indicate why we should see a doctor?
Yeah.
Can you address that?
I think I can answer that, because I think if you were to ask a room of 100 people who's ever concerned about their memory, everyone's going to raise their hand. Right. I'm concerned about my memory sometimes. And our brains start aging when we're in our mid-20s. Right. So the brain aging process happens, and there's some normal aging. Alzheimer's and other dementias are not normal aging.
Right.
And that's why it makes sense to kind of ask some of these questions. But when people have areas that are starting to impact their daily life, memory that's really impacting people's functioning. So not just you run into the grocery store, somebody runs into you and goes, Steve, how are you today? How's your family? Blah, 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 and knows all about you, and you're like, I know this person, I can't recall their name. Right. That's normal. We all have that moment, as well as if you've been in the mall and you go out to the parking lot and you're like, where's my car? We have that moment too, and some of that's normal. But when you run into someone, you have no recollection of who they are and aren't able to recall that with time, or you're not able to retrace your steps. Some of those things get to a level where they're really interfering with your daily functioning. And it doesn't mean it's Alzheimer's, but we have a program called Know the 10 Signs. So there's 10 different warning signs. And I'll tell you what, when I look down the list, I think sometimes, do I have some of these? And we all have busy lives, or many of us have busy lives where we're stressed, or we're managing all sorts of different things. So some of those things happen. But things when we start having problems with processing and complex tasks, things that were always very comfortable to us in the past. Maybe we were excellent at managing our checkbook. Yes. And now, even with extra time and with extra tools, we're struggling a little bit more with that. It makes sense to see a doctor. Yes. Because it could be something as simple as, a thyroid issue that could be managed with medications. Medications sometimes have interactions or infections, or depression can even cause similar symptoms. So ruling out those causes can really be beneficial.
Well, exactly. And so when someone visits a physician to try to receive a specific diagnosis, it's really more of a matter of ruling other things out, because right now there's not a specific blood test. There's neuropsychiatric evaluations that they can do, or in a primary care physician, the mini mental exam, that are indicators of attention that needs to be paid. But I think the point that is strongly made by everyone I've ever spoken to is that the earlier that you receive it's not a diagnosis, but an indicator, they're saying you should take a look at this pathway for treatment. Would you agree with that?
I think, the earlier the better, because again, it allows you to rule out those other causes that are quite treatable. Right. And if it is indeed a dementia, and you're right, the workup is at a place where it's often still ruling out. Right. Although our cognitive tests and our tools have gotten better, so we're diagnosing people, I think, a lot better than we did in the past. Yes. That, when you've got that diagnosis, it allows for those conversations, and it allows for some of the treatments we do have. Right. So many folks are on drugs like Aricept and Namenda, Exelon, and those drugs, while they don't slow the disease, they can make people operate better. Right. And if given earlier in the disease, it's best. Right, right.
So another big issue, of course, is family caregivers who are well, first of all, the heart thing of seeing their spouse or their father go through or mother go through the cognitive changes that they're experiencing. And then there's an increasing responsibility that comes as the disease progresses. And we know it's a tremendous stress on families. What does the Alzheimer's Association do in terms of family caregivers and support groups and that type of thing? Let's talk about
Definitely. You know, that's one of the biggest reasons why we're here, is to support families or support everyone affected by the disease. We do that partially by our 800 line. Again, that place for someone to call no matter what hour it is, either get local resources or just to talk to someone and say, hey, this is really tough. Or, hey, I'm running into this challenge when I'm trying to communicate with them, my loved one, they're struggling with this. And we can give tips and techniques and things that we found from other callers and from research that might be very helpful and beneficial. We can also direct people to one of the over 40 support groups that we have around the state. We've got wonderful facilitators throughout the state that run groups where people can go. Often it's once a month, and talk with people and just get support. Find out what they're doing when someone is waking up in the middle of the night, or when there's a concern around wandering. We also have our website, alz.org, which has so much information. You know, if family members or people living with the disease go, they can get a lot of information to hopefully help plan and to make navigating some of the disease symptoms a little bit easier.
Well, yes, the educational resources that you offer are excellent. I have these conversations with people every day just in the normal course of my work, and people really do need to make themselves aware of kind of like the scope of the disease, and there's a certain terrain that one's going to travel, and it's good to have kind of a little bit of a roadmap. Again, the earlier, the better. So not just in terms of diagnosis, but also reaching out for help through the resources that you offer and whatever is available in the local community. You have a number of walks to end Alzheimer's coming up. These are, first of all, they're tremendous fun. I've participated in a number of them. Let's talk about those coming up.
Awesome. We're really excited, and it's getting started soon. Our first walk is actually this Saturday. We have one in the York Beaches area and the one in Calais. So really exciting, you know, a place for, again, going back to your initial question about stigma, a place to go to realize, hey, we're not alone. You know, there's so many people at our walks. And people are telling their stories, they're sharing their stories, they're making connections with one another. So whether someone is living with the disease currently, is the care partner or family member of someone with the disease, or have lost someone to the disease, you know, there's, I think, just a tremendous sense of community. And we have 8 of them taking place across the state. So probably the closest ones to here would be on October 3rd, we have one in Augusta, and on October 24th, we have one in Brunswick.
Oh, good.
But we also have a big one coming up on September 26th in Portland. So definitely go to our website, go to alz.org/Maine to learn more about the walks.
We want people to know about that. So I know that, well, I know this because you told me. I know this, that aside from the U.S. government and the Chinese government, that the Alzheimer's Association is the largest funder of research in the world.
Yeah. One of the things, you know, we provide a lot of care support, but another piece of what we do is working towards finding more answers, more treatments, and hopefully someday a cure. We're the 3rd largest funder after the U.S. government and the Chinese government. It's kind of interesting to think of a nonprofit as one of these big players, and it's through the donations that are made to our organization that we're pretty nimble and able to find research studies that maybe wouldn't be recognized otherwise.
Right.
But we see potential in the scientists, and there's been many occasions where we've put some money towards a research project. It's given us some hope and some answers, and then the National Institute of Health has come by and said, wow, this is looking pretty promising too. Let's give it some more money.
Yes.
So I think it's pretty neat. We've got a medical science department, and actually I think it was, I should know the date. Recently down in Washington, D.C., we had the Alzheimer's Association International Conference.
Right.
And you probably saw that in the news.
Yes.
There was some really exciting stuff coming out of that, things that we're hoping in the future years will give us, you know, even more answers. But every year, nationally. Then next year, I think it's going to be in Canada. We gather researchers and scientists from around the world to come together and share their ideas
Right.
and collaborate, which is kind of unprecedented in research, where everyone wants to kind of hold on to their ideas
Yes.
because, of the potential financial impact that it might have on them. But as the association, it's pretty cool to see all these ideas coming together and being shared.
Well, and that's what it's going to take. It's really going to take a collaboration of many brilliant people to really try to. I was around when AIDS first hit, and working in hospitals when it very first hit the hospitals, and I saw it go from a certain death sentence to what's now a very manageable disease.
Yeah.
One of the things that has really struck me about Alzheimer's, the last time I look at the figures, was the cost, and this was a couple of years ago probably, but the cost was $185 billion per year, just in the medical costs associated with Alzheimer's and the cost to the overall economy. And I just happened to read an article right next to it. That was the peak cost of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the peak cost, so $185 billion. So the research is essential because as an age-related disease, what's happening, our demographics are increasing. You said something really interesting prior to when we started the show. You said that Alzheimer's is the 6th leading cause of death, and then
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's a terminal disease that we're hoping to get more answers for, but right now it's the 6th leading cause of death out of the top 10, and out of the top 10 causes of death, it's the only one that we can't prevent, cure, or really have effective treatments for currently.
Right. It's the only one that we don't yet have a cure. The other 9 of the top 10 all have effective treatments, mitigation.
Or one of those. So it's kind of unique in those top 10, which again points to just even the greater importance on why we need to fund more research, why we need to find more answers so that the 5.3 million Americans and 26,000 Mainers living with the disease today will hopefully have treatments tomorrow down the road.
Well, exactly. And as we had talked about the biggest risk being age, right now in the country we have 10,000 people turning 65 every day.
Yeah.
So that's one of the realities we're confronted with. The incidence at age 65 is 1 in 8, I believe. Is that correct?
I think it's either 1 or 8 and 1 in 9. And when people get into their 80s, it's around 1 in 3.
Exactly.
And we've got an estimated 5.3 million people living with the disease right now.
Yes.
Maine's the oldest. Maine's age, as far as mean age, it's the oldest state in the union, and we've got a huge amount of people, huge amount of baby boomers making up our population. I think it's around 25%. There was an article in the paper about that today.
Yes.
So the biggest risk factor for Alzheimer's and any form of dementia is age. There's other things that we look at, but one of the biggest ones is age, and we know as a state we've got a lot of people getting into that increased risk factor, increased risk category.
Yeah, and to me, that's why we need to face it head on. So working in senior care, what I've really come to recognize is it's a crapshoot. Actually, none of us knows if this is going to happen to us or not. Those of us that I'm in that baby boomer demographic, and this is my little bit of kind of public crusade. I think our only way into this as individuals is to open our hearts and to expand into it and to not shrink away, but to be willing to engage it. And if we happen to be the person that draws the unlucky short straw, we have to engage our families, our friends, the community resources, our physicians. That's something that I really personally want to communicate to people. It's that the whole thing of hiding away from it is horribly counterproductive. It just doesn't help us at all.
Well, one of the most important things is building a community. With a diagnosis like this, spouses trying to go on it alone without getting support from everyone else. So often it's not successful.
Right.
Because, both people can become exhausted.
Right.
So it really takes building that team, and that looks different for every family.
Right.
But sometimes community is, having the neighbor bring bring your loved one out for a coffee so that you can take a nap.
Exactly.
Or paying someone to come in and help out in the home and play chess or play checkers or, read poems or play music together, whatever it might be, to allow that primary caregiver to get some respite.
Yes. Well, and so there's a couple thoughts for me. One, it's why your particular job with the Alzheimer's Association is so important, because you're receiving those help calls, and that's what we want people to do. We want people to reach out for the assistance. But then also the point you make, which I've heard from so many people, is that friends sometimes start withdrawing. And that goes to the fear, shame, stigma thing. And if friends can find a way to somehow stay connected and offer that little bit of help, so if the family caregiver can get out of the house for an hour to go do some groceries or something like that, that is such a massive gift to give to a friend that and sometimes you've known those friends all your life. So I know we're in the same. We want to encourage people to stay connected to the people that somehow get the disease and the families. We want them to stay connected and to offer that little assistance that you can give, and not shrink away from it.
And I think that's where the education piece comes in, as part of our public awareness, realizing that this disease is not contagious, that, with increased understanding, we know why sometimes people are acting out of what might be considered out of character for them. And maybe we know more approaches to make us feel more comfortable as friends and neighbors to know, okay, this isn't something I should take personally. This is something that's a organic disease taking place in this person's brain, slowly changing their abilities.
Exactly. So cancer has almost become like a heroic disease to fight. People do the good fight, and sometimes they win, and if winning means remission and curing the disease. And we know with Alzheimer's we're not there yet, but we know with the work of the Alzheimer's Association that we will get there, that it can turn into a manageable disease. That's the source of my huge support. We just need your organization to be doing what it's doing. So we talked about the walks, we talked about the family and caregiver support groups. Is there anything else we should say about that? You said there's 40 throughout the state.
There's 40 around the state. We also have a telephonic support group so people can call in if traveling's challenging for them.
Right.
We also offer other services, some safety services, helping to have those conversations around driving when driving starts to become not safe.
Yes.
Conversations around wandering and making the home safe. We assist people with care consultation, either having them come into our Scarborough office or assisting them over the phone and talking about what should I be thinking about for the future. And that can either be with a person with the disease and a loved one or with their family, depending on what makes more sense.
Right. The driving is a complicated issue to address sometimes.
It is.
My own father, who was a Teamster truck driver for 40 years, he was not about to give up his keys very easily. And I think adult children get kind of placed in a tough box. It's like, well, when do I start recognizing that the side swipes on the car are a sign of danger? What can you tell us about your view of that from the helpline?
I think while some folks with early stage disease are very able to drive, and I don't think a diagnosis itself says, let's take away the keys. I think a diagnosis says, let's be more observant. Let's be aware.
Yes.
Let's be aware for the changes, because we know that it's not just memory changes, it's visual spatial changes, it's judgment and planning changes that are taking place, because the whole brain is affected with the disease, that it makes it so it's necessary for family members to be aware. Sometimes doctors and physicians can be great partners in having that conversation, so it doesn't always need to be the family saying, the keys have to go. Some doctors are very savvy, and some doctors will also request the DMV or BMV.
DMV.
It was a DMV. I think they're in Maine. I'm from Maine. I should know. I took my test with them. But to have them go forth and request a test,
right,
to see if the person's still able. And some people pass, and some people don't.
Yes.
People don't.
Yes. Well, so we're going to be coming towards a close in just a few minutes now. What haven't we hit that you would like to talk about? Is there anything particular?
Talked about clinical trials. We talked about the walks. Would definitely love, they're growing every year. Want as many people to come and be part of that event because I think it's really powerful. Having had the privilege to meet so many wonderful people at these walks, the 24/7 helpline. Just know we're here as a resource. It stinks when I'm talking with people very late in the disease and they say, "Oh, I wish I knew about you when I was diagnosed."
Oh, right.
And it's like, I wish you did too. So definitely reach out to us so that we can see if we can help you build a team. People help build a team and find local supports.
Help build a community, exactly. You said it very well before, but I'll repeat it. We need a community, and really, we are not meant to try to do these things by ourselves. And I have an impression, the best compliment I've been paid by my colleagues is they say you're not from away, but I've lived from away for a long time. But much of what I admire about Mainers, that strong independence and the way that they handle things, it doesn't serve us so well if we're confronted with these very difficult things. And toughing it out by yourself isn't the way to go.
You're exactly right.
Right. And so that's why I'm a massive supporter of the Alzheimer's Association and your particular role in it and the whole, serving the whole state. It's really fantastic. So thanks for coming to talk to us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here and the work that you do. So that's it. Another show of Spotlight on Seniors. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you the next time.